All right, Bulls and Bears, let's talk about what Wendy's is doing. Yes, the fast food restaurant Wendy's. This is pretty crazy. We're going to get into some other economic news here, but let's start off with this. Wendy's announced they're going to do dynamic pricing. Now, they had to backpedal on some of the things that they said, but basically, what they said initially is what they're going to do is have dynamic pricing. That means real time menu changes. So as the rush hour begins for lunch, let's say 12 o'clock to 2:30, what they could do is have these digital menu prices go up during those few hours and then go down later when it slows down. So in other words, when you go get your lunch, you might order your meal. You might begin looking at the menu at 12:59 or let's say 11:59, and then all of a sudden you order 2 minutes later, but the price has went up because now you're into rush hour pricing. So it's pretty crazy, and especially in the position that U.S. consumers are in right now, will this work for Wendy's? I think it's going to be a big backfire if they proceed to go ahead and do this. But let's bring up some news items here on this and just kind of talk about here, what Wendy's laid out there. So Wendy's dynamic pricing is Uber-like pricing. Is it the new normal? Wendy scrambles to clarify plans for dynamic pricing, claims it won't. And when I read some of the other articles on this, they kind of backtracked on what they initially said. So initially, basically, they said they're going to have the ability to change prices in real time. Now, let's first talk about that. Why would you create the ability, or why would you enable this type of pricing if you did not plan on using it? That's the question that I have. But let's take a look at a couple articles here and see what they're saying about this. Now, a follow-up to this was Wendy's coming out and saying, we won't raise menu prices during peak hours. Okay, so when will you raise menu prices? Again, why would you come out with this, enabling this dynamic pricing if you weren't planning on using it? It doesn't make any sense, right? So now if you're not going to raise prices during peak hours, when are you going to raise prices? During non-peak hours, like 1 hour before closing, you're going to double your menu prices? It doesn't make sense. So I think they kind of got caught in this whole dynamic pricing capability release and what they had announced. Wendy's said it won't use surge pricing. That's CNN. Burger King has free. Okay, let's read this one here. Okay, let me share this with you because this is pretty weird. This is out of People, and let me zoom in on this because I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly here. So People is a pretty widely known publication, right? They even put out a magazine, a physical magazine. Burger King has free Whoopers. They put down Whoopers after Wendy's announces dynamic pricing. So Wendy's wanted to capitalize on the news that was created by this Wendy's announcement. So does People magazine not know how to spell Whoppers? Okay, so in the article they spelled it right, but maybe it was just the search result. They got it wrong and they put Whoopers in there. Anyways, what's this going to mean for Wendy's? Will you, if you go to Wendy's, will you stop going there if they raise their prices during certain hours? Or is that business? That's just how it goes. I try not to eat fast food. Sometimes I have to if we're on a long drive, and mostly coffee. If I have to get a coffee, if I'm tired and I'm on a long drive, I will pay for a coffee. I try to get just black coffee and then put like maybe half milk in there instead of paying for the $4, $5 latte. I try to just get like the $2.50 or $3 coffee if I'm on a long drive. But as far as fast food, maybe once every 2 months I'll stop and get a fast food item just because I know how these food items are made. I try not to overconsume that type of food. You know what I mean? All right, but let's get into some other economic financial news. Our last report, we talked about how rents are dropping, how car prices are dropping, not just dropping, but the amounts of price declines, the size of the price declines are getting bigger. So not only are things continuing to drop, they're accelerating to the downside, not as fast as some would like, but when you compare it to previous months, price declines are getting bigger in those two areas. Now, if you look at some other things, not so much, like real estate. If you look at the year over year numbers, we're not really down that much. If you look at the price compared to the peak, which was late last summer, then we're still down, by a few percentage points, right? But let's get into this here because consumers are carrying the most debt we've ever carried as a whole. Now, when you look at the top 50%, especially the baby boomers are doing actually still pretty well compared to the bottom 50%. Of course, the top 10%, we know that's the group that's doing better than ever and gaining more and more wealth all the time. But the bottom 90%, then when you cut that in half, let's say the bottom 45% and the top 45% of the bottom 90%, that top 45% group, especially the baby boomers, most of them fall in that group as far as wealth. They're doing pretty good. And we talked a few reports ago about how casinos raked in a record in 2023, breaking the 2022 record. And before that, it was 2021 set a record. So each year, casinos are making more and more money. And we had asked the question, how can consumers still go to the casinos and still have this money just to throw around and just to waste most of the time? I mean, sometimes you'll win, but for the most part, the house wins, right? So we had asked the question, where are people coming up with the extra money? Well, of the bottom 90%, the top 45% still has quite a lot of disposable income, especially the baby boomers, people that bought their homes back in the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s, when homes were, one-fourth of the price, one-eighth of the price, depending on the location, maybe even one-tenth of the price of what they are now. Depends on which area you're talking about. So I think that's the group that tends to go to the casinos the most. And just in my personal experience going to the casinos, it is kind of the 50 plus crowd as far as what I noticed looking around. It wasn't a big hangout for 20s and 30 somethings. And of course, there were those age people there. But when you look at everybody, it was mostly, I think, 50 plus age group that I noticed in the casino. Now, if you're in a casino that has a club also in it, maybe in Vegas somewhere, you're probably going to see more 20 and 30 something people there. But just as a whole, in my experience going to casinos, it seemed to be like the baby boomer crowd, if you know what I mean. So I think those are the people that have the most, not the most, because it's the top 10% that have the most disposable income. But as far as the bottom 90%, those are the people that have the most disposable income. So I just wanted to touch on that because in a recent video, we had talked about the record the casinos brought in last year. Now, the economy is continuing to function what looks to be as normal because you still have these credit card companies issuing more and more debt or allowing unlimited debt to be accumulated. So I think what's going to happen here in 2024 is the banks are going to continue to loan out money regardless of the surge in defaults. Remember, credit card defaults are approaching 6%, and that's a jump from up 3% just a few years ago. Credit card delinquencies have doubled in just under 2 years. So that's an alarming sign. Now, if you look back at 2007, 2008, 2009, during that time, defaults or delinquencies in credit cards surged up to 12%. So we're only halfway to where we were during the financial crisis. But even then, I think even 10, 12% delinquencies, I still don't think credit card companies are going to drop credit limits because remember, that's the key to keeping the economy functioning is to continue to allow consumers to spend. And if they start freezing credit limits or dropping credit limits, that's when things really start hitting the fan. That's when unemployment spikes. So it's all about the debt issuance, the debt markets, so to speak, and the accumulation of debt and allowing people to spend money they don't have. Until that stops, you're likely not going to see a dramatic or severe rapid downturn. So something has to break in the debt markets in order to see a rapid downturn, in my opinion. Until then, it's going to be a frog in the pot, slow boil into more and more debt. And you're going to see these the numbers continue to get worse, especially delinquencies amongst consumers. All right, so we're going to wrap this one up for today, folks. What do you think about Wendy's dynamic pricing and how they backspin and try to reverse what they initially said? Of course, they are saying they have the ability to change menu prices in real time, or they will once this is fully implemented. But now they don't plan on raising prices during peak hours. To me, that doesn't make sense. How do you explain that? And what will you do if you are someone that goes to Wendy's? I'd like to hear from you. Will this change your opinion? And will you seek alternative menu choices, so to speak, now that Wendy's has came out and said this? All right, everybody, keep stacking. Everybody, big love. Bye for now. Peace.